welcome back to our podcast, The Blend Effect. I'm Siley.
And I'm Radhika. And today we're going to be talking about Indian festivals.
Yeah. So how about we start off with some trivia?
Yes. I can ask you the first question.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So can you tell me what are the 5 days of Diwali?
Okay, good one. So I know that Diwali, the day before Diwali starts, we have Vasubaras.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I know that from my heavy Gujarati influence.
Yeah.
And then the first day of Diwali is Dhanatrayodashi,
Mm-hmm.
followed by Narka Chaturdashi.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm a little bit iffy about the next 2 days because I feel like आपलं मराठीमध्ये एक असतं आणि you know the influence I grew up with is a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so I know we have Lakshmi Pujan, but then we also have Diwali, the day of Diwali.
Yeah.
We also have Padwa,
Yeah.
right? Which some people will say is the new year
Yeah.
for some cultures.
Yeah.
But for us, I guess it's Padwa. We're celebrating our husbands. And then we have Bhaubis to celebrate our brother-sister bond.
Yeah. I think that kind of pretty much lines up with like my
kind
kind of understanding of things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Question for you is, what is the significance of Gudi Padwa?
So Gudi Padwa, I think, celebrates, our Marathi New Year and also the beginning of spring.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think त्या दिवशी Ram वनवासातून परत आला.
Yeah.
So त्यामुळे त्यांचं स्वागत करायला म्हणून सगळ्यांनी गुढी उभारल्या होत्या.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, so question for you now. What is the day after Navratra called and what is the significance?
Okay, so it's called Dasara, which is the 10th day.
Yeah.
And the significance, I believe, is that it's the day that Durga had defeated the demon Mahishasur.
Yes.
Okay, so what is the stotra that we say 21 times on Ganesh Chaturthi?
Atharva Shirša?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really great that despite the fact that, contrary to popular belief,
Yeah.
where many people will stereotype us as, people who don't know anything.
Yeah.
We actually do know things.
Yeah.
We, did learn a thing or two growing up.
Yes. Yes. And I think the credit for that, of course, goes to our parents, of course.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that, I think I wanted to bring up, and I'm sure you can probably speak to this too, is that, in India, right, cultural festivals or any kind of, celebrations, whether directly religious or not, are very much evident, obvious, in the public sphere and like everywhere in the public sphere, right? Like whether you go shopping for new clothes, they've got a sale going on, or you see, loko kharedi karta hai, or you see, decorations on the streets versus that was very different growing up in North America, right?
100%. Yeah. And I think that we get to hear so much about how people are excited about, Are, Ganpati yetoy, or it's time for Diwali, chala kharedi karuya.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that experience,
no.
Here growing up in America or Canada,
Yeah.
essentially in the house or at a Marathi Mandir event or some sort of like Mandirat Gelu, there you would get a sense of its festive time.
Yeah.
But not like in India, you go outside, the streets are as they were every day. You go to the store, there's not like a Diwali sale or anything. Not even the Indian stores.
No. I mean, gosh, there were probably no Indian stores when we were growing up. Or very few. But And I think that's the part, right? Like, I remember my parents definitely saying, Are, India sarki majja naste. Or, Are, आपण इंडियाला एकदा दिवाळीच्या वेळेला, म्हणजे आता ह्या मुलींना दाखवायला न्यायला पाहिजे, right? But I think in order for them to like kind of upkeep that, festive mood or, really get us connected, they kind of did as much as they could at home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
that's exactly the same
yeah.
that it was. I mean, did you ever go to India during any festival?
No, actually, because we were always in school, I feel like, and it was like hard to take time off.
Yeah.
But now that I'm older, I'm like, okay, gosh, I'm like, I want to take like, my, daughter certainly to experience different festivals in India because like we never got to do that as a kid, right? So I think that's like the one thing. But I think, well, I mean, I guess I should ask you, did you get to go?
I actually never have either, which is really sad. And I keep trying to make plans now as an adult before my daughter goes to school.
Right, exactly.
To be able to attend either Diwali or Ganpati. But kahi na kahi tari hota because
right,
of
and
which we're just not able to go. But I'm, I have another 4 years to go.
Yeah, exactly. So you have some time. Yeah. And I think, Siley, you can tell me a little bit about kind of like, okay, I mean, we can like pick any festival, but maybe let's just say like Ganpati or Diwali or really, really like any festival. Tell me a little bit about how you celebrated it, like growing up here and how you felt like, that you were, connected.
So I think, again, it was very different, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our festivals were celebrated either in the home, either in friends' homes, either at a Mandar event, or, you know, something of the likes. So essentially, for something like Sankranti or Ganpati, ह्या गोष्टी घरी व्हायच्या किंवा people would call us to their house, and then, you know, for Sankranti, there was Haldi Kunku, or for Ganpati, लोक घरी बोलवतात. But for something like Gudi Padwa or Diwali, there was always a Marathi Mandal कार्यक्रम. That would happen. Was that kind of the same experience you had?
Absolutely. And I remember as a kid going to these like Marathi Mandal programs, and sometimes I remember being like, gosh, why are my parents like dragging me? Because of course, you know, like they had, you know, something religious or culturally significant like to Gudi Padwa or like to Diwali, but माझे दुसरे पण programs असायचे ना, म्हणजे गाण्याचे programs or whatever. And I remember as a kid being like, oh gosh, like I don't even understand what they're singing or why they're doing what they're doing. But looking back, I'm so thankful we went to all of those things, because now I want to do all that for my daughter. And it gave me like so much early exposure, right? That's been sort of embedded in my head. And then I think apart from the community events, like I know like my parents did a really good job of celebrating what we could at home. So that आमच्याकडे, for example, गणपती बसायचा नाही. But like my आत्या had गणपती, so we would go there, you know, all the time. But माझी आई, for example, you know, I mean, during Navratra, like ती, you know, I mean, like ती भोंडला करायची. She used to call all our friends, you know, like do भोंडला ever since we were kids. So आत्ताही आजपर्यंत तरी म्हणजे I, you know, like do that for my daughter, right?
Oh, very good.
Right. Or, you know, I mean, even like during Sankranta, right? Like आमच्याकडे हळदी कुंकू व्हायचं. You know, I didn't understand what was going on or why we were doing it, but she did it, right? So that was the one thing. And then, of course, during Diwali, you know, like Lakshmi Pujan was a big thing. As you said, depends, I think, where you're kind of coming from. But for my family, and I think a lot of Maharashtrians certainly,
absolutely,
you know, Lakshmi Pujan, किंवा, you know, फराळ घरी करायचा. किंवा even for that matter, you know, कुठल्या फेस्टिवलला काय आपण खातो, काय जेवतो, you know, what do we make? गुढी पाडव्याच्या वेळेला श्रीखंड असायचं. These things I think are like embedded, right?
It's funny because I don't know what they do in India. They must be making farar ghari. But you could also go out and buy it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But here, that wasn't the case at all when we were younger. So I do remember late into the night, my mom, and then sometimes my dad would help her out. You know? Many times actually, that they would be up late into the night making farar. And at that time I was like, oh, this is great. You know, I never really understood what was going on. But as I got older, then I started associating the two. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting because we didn't get that so easily. Our parents had to stay up and make it, but they did.
They did. Yeah, you know? They did. Like, you know, I think all the power to them. Because even in that time, right, like not to kind of, you know, deter from this conversation, but त्यावेळेला even like to find the ingredients was a mission. You had to drive 1.5 hours to some Indian grocery store and plan everything. It's not like, you know, I mean, how it is now, right?
But where there's like 10 Indian stores around every corner.
Exactly, right?
But I did want to bring up another point where you spoke about bhondla. I think that's really great that your, you know, family was able to do that. I actually have a different experience because I had a very strong Gujarati influence in my upbringing. Because as I said, there was not really any Marathi people around. And so to add to that, my mom was actually also born and raised in Gujarat. In Baroda.
Right.
That being said, she's very Marathi. She's like the most Marathi person.
Right.
You know? But because of that, I think that we were always very drawn to going to Garba.
Oh, yes.
You know? And so it was very interesting because I actually didn't know what Bhondla was until maybe like the last year or two.
Right.
But oh man, we used to go to Garba every single year from the age of maybe 10 or something like that. And of course, that's important too. It's one and the same. It's all the same culture. But that was my experience growing up of Navratri is, you know, having different garbas. And I think the garbas are different. I actually did go to a garba in Mumbai one time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it was as an adult. I think it was in probably 2015.
Okay.
But I can't say that I mean, not to put anyone down. But I can't say I enjoyed it as much as I did the garbas here. It might have been because it was in Maharashtra and it's more of a Gujarati thing. And maybe I need to go to Garba in Gujarat to really compare. But I also can't say I enjoy the Bay Area or the LA Garbas.
Well, I mean, the crowds are so much bigger.
They're so big, right? And so what I was noticing with all these big events was that you have people kind of just dancing in their own families, or a circle here and a circle there and a circle here, and like असे 3-4 देवी मांडले like लावले आहेत कुठे कुठे. And it was just so odd to me because it's a community event coming together. So in Sacramento, it's a medium-sized crowd, right? So what we used to do is we used to have a huge hall rented out. And then there was one devi in the middle. And then there were multiple circles, but they were all like around the same baby.
Yes.
And, varying sizes. And it was really nice because we were able to go and dance and meet our friends and hang out. And I think in a previous podcast where we had spoken about how we were not allowed to have, male friends.
Yeah.
But, this was like a way to kind of have a co-ed interaction without getting into trouble.
Yeah. Exactly, right? Because it was safe, right? Because you were going to our cultural festival or something. Yeah, I mean, so I also, had the opportunity to, go to Garbas growing up. But I think one of the things, Sally, that I kind of want to maybe segue into a little bit is I think it's so great because even though we were born and brought up here, even though we had such, little, connectivity to India and Indian exposure at that time, what I think is really cool is as we grew up, I think somewhere along the way we started to get excited about these festivals. Even though, again, right, it wasn't India, it wasn't in the public domain. But I remember, my parents saying, gosh, it's Diwali next week, or this is coming, that's coming. And somewhere along the way, now, I feel sometimes even more than my parents now, I get excited about these festivals and they're like, gosh, look at you.
I think it's because we have kids that we want to pass on to.
Right.
But now tell me this, for something like Diwali, right? Where generally there was always a Marathi Mandal Karyakram.
Yes.
And usually that Karyakram was always a talent show of some sort, right?
Yeah.
I feel in my head, maybe our husbands will affiliate or associate Diwali with the vibe and the culture, or Ganpati with the vibe and the culture. But in my head, I always affiliate Diwali with a talent show. Has that happened to you as well?
Exactly. So in Toronto, at Diwali, usually there used to be one big natak, and then at Ganpati there used to be a kids talent show.
Oh.
But you're so right, because when I talk to my husband today, he affiliates Diwali with Diwali Pahat, or Farar Karun Laukar. They used to get up and do this puja or that puja. But I affiliate literally Diwali with a week after Diwali is done, now there's this big Marathi Mandir function that we're going to watch, and the kids are sitting at it's funny because the kids are sitting at the registration desk. For helping set up chairs and stuff. It's a very different vibe. Same thing for Ganpati, right? My husband affiliates it probably with, going to different people's houses. Right, exactly. Exactly, right? And it's Tencha Ghari Motha Ganpati Vasayacha, people used to come. I affiliate it with going to the, of course, as I said, we went to, my Atya's house. But, most of it, more of it is Sarata, Marathi Mandalacha kaiti function hai, maapni practice hai, mulanchi or whatever. It's a very, very different connection.
Very different connection in our minds. And it's interesting because I wonder how now going forward, we have our kids, how are we going to blend the two,
Yeah.
And I do feel I never knew what Diwali Pahat was growing up. Okay, it wasn't a thing when I was growing up. But in San Diego, one of my very, very close, near and dear people, she was actually my Kathak guru. She would host a Diwali Pahat every year. And that was kind of my first introduction to that. Then recently I heard that they're now doing it in Sacramento, where my parents live.
Right.
And so I'm kind of hoping that growing up, yes, we can still have these karyakram, which our daughters can also participate in.
Yeah.
But then I also hope that we can start participating more in these Diwali Pahat type of things, because that had a very different vibe to it than the one that I experienced growing up.
Yeah, I think it's so true. And you're talking about blending the two. So at the Amcha Ghare, ever since I've been married, Amcha Ghare, did divsacha Ganpati basto. Ata tencha, Apurva's family Ganpati has now sort of officially come here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so at the Amcha Ghare, of course, growing up, my parents didn't have Ganpati, but you know what? I have Ganpati here at home. But at the same time, I'm also oh gosh, is there some Marathi event happening where I can take Niva to show her Ganpati in that kind of way, right? So I think we try to do the best of both. And in fact, I think you and I, if anyone, we want to do the best of both, right? Because we have our experience here, but we have both our husbands who were born and brought up in India, and they have their experience from there.
I literally remember a few years ago, I sat down and I was I'm going to learn how to make ukdiche modak.
Yeah, okay, wow, yeah.
And I figured it out. Yeah. Something that I thought I would never be able to do. Or my mom wasn't really big on making ukdiche modak. She would make other modaks all the time. But, I sat there and I tried, and the first time I failed miserably, but then eventually I got a hang of it.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting how, despite growing up here, now that we're having more exposure to it, and we had the exposure as kids as well, but somehow our exposure is evolving as we experience our life with our husbands, as the world globalizes, and we're able to learn these things, which is kind of fun too, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. When we first started having Ganpati, we used to, like get ukdiche modak from somewhere. And the same thing, last year I was like, okay, I was like, I'm just going to try this. Yeah. And, I was like, okay, I was like, maybe these won't be servable, but I was like, let me just try. Yeah. But
they turned out good.
Yeah, they did. And, it's so funny, right? Because it's like, it's amazing that, we are, again, born and brought up here and, still wanting to do all of these things, which I think halli India पण सगळेजण बाहेर order देतात. I don't know who buys things or yeah. So I think that's the funny part, but I think that's also like the silver lining, right? We want to keep up our traditions, but we also want to be able to blend them with the way that we celebrated things here, right?
I think that we have that excitement because, again, we didn't get it.
Yeah.
I think for my husband, for him, it's more of a nostalgia.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Are ukdeche modak.
Yeah.
I associate this with Ganpati.
Yeah.
I can't say that I necessarily associate it like that.
Yes.
It's more of a, oh, wow, I know you associate it with that. I know Indians associate it with that. So now I want to start associating with that. And त्याची excitement असते, which is a little bit of a different experience than probably what he has.
Yeah. Do you think, Saili, I guess maybe to kind of close this off a little bit, like, how do you see this kind of going forward for you and for your daughter and for your family? Like, blending the two and, is it, does it make you want to continue all these things every year? And
I think so. I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I would want to have some sort of a blend of the two because at the end of the day, we cannot immerse her in the Indian culture that my husband got to experience growing up.
Right. Yeah.
I would love to, if I have a chance to, in her, conscious life, not that she's a baby, so she's not going to remember anything.
Yeah.
But when she's a little bit older, my hope is that I will be able to take her to India at some point.
Yes.
While there's a festive season going on, just so that she gets to experience it firsthand.
Yeah.
Not just through listening about it from other people.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I hope to do. Then I hope that we're able to bring that back and engage in some of it here. It's great because we live in the Bay Area. We have a Dhol Tasha, scene here.
Yeah.
So I think it would be really great to be able to do some of the things that my husband got to experience that we can't do here while also doing the things that we did growing up, such as कार्यक्रम.
Right, exactly. And I also think, I think same for me, right? I want to try to blend the two. But I also think, kind of on this note, at the same time, I'm equally exposing her to Christmas and doing, like the Easter egg hunt and dressing up for Halloween.
Right.
So I think they totally get the best of both worlds, just like what we did, right? Yes. Like, we had, like double the festivals growing up. So October is not only Navratra and Diwali, but there's also Halloween. Right? Like for Gudi Padwa, it's not just Gudi Padwa, but, Easter is also just around the corner.
And Christmas is followed by Sankranti.
Exactly, right? So it's sort of this, like, I think it's great because I think they get the best of both.
It's funny because we're talking about nostalgia and whatnot, and we did grow up with these modified versions of Indian festivals, but we did grow up with a very real version of American or Canadian festivals,
right? Yes,
or Western,
the Western,
festivals.
yeah.
And so I think that we probably have nostalgia towards those as our spouses do towards Indian festivals.
Absolutely.
And so it's interesting because, like you said, we got the best of both. We got to experience both. And, I guess our kids will get to do the same. Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Just like we get, nostalgic about, drinking eggnog at Christmas. The same thing with like Ganpati, right? So I want my daughter to be affiliated with both of those things. I want her to feel this equal nostalgia for modak, but also for, eating like a plum cake at Christmas or,
right.
Yeah. So,
right.
That's sort of, yeah. And I think that's the best part, right?
I think that's what makes it a blend.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah. Awesome. Good chat.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So thanks guys for joining us today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and send us your comments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always looking for feedback.
Yes. All right. Bye guys. See you next time.
Bye.